Yes, ma'am. I'm here again at this meeting. I was attended the last meeting, and I appreciate your consideration for my property. And if you got any questions or need anything, just don't hesitate to ask.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for being here.
We turn those microphones on.
If there is anyone else who seeks public participation, please submit a request with your name, and we will be happy to call you either during your item or at the end of the meeting. With that, we have approval of the minutes for March 10th and June 22nd. Any comments from the committee?
Yeah, I believe on the 22nd, they did a terrible job of spelling your name. So maybe they ought to correct that.
Thank you, John. Thank you. So, correction will be noted. So.
Mine also had a mistake in another spot.
Okay.
I've got a correction.
Mhm.
On page 24 in the minutes, it's noted.
Which one?
page
June?
tw-
I'm
oh,
sorry,
I'm
is it
sorry, the
June?
22nd, the most recent ones.
Okay.
Of June.
Thank you.
Yes. It says, Mr. Crump suggests a staff contact Paul Stamets. That was, I don't know if Paul Stamets, I don't think that was me. That was,
Yeah.
very good. There was one other on page 15. It said a field had turned into wild buses. I would like to see a field of wild buses, but I would think it's bushes.
I would too.
I would like to see a field of wild buses.
Yeah, on page 18, I'm not sure if this matters too much, but the action said 9-0, but I guess it was 0-9 technically. I don't know if that matters at all for like a property that's ineligible, which again, I don't want people to misread that. I'm not sure if that's the right way to put it. They put 9, like usually it's the 4s first, so it was actually reversed, but I'm not quite sure if that matters, but just want to point it out.
So noted?
Yeah.
Okay.
And one last thing, I still hope to add one of the properties which was nominated to that map of the nominated lists, which I'm not sure if that is going to be a revised version or not. I know in one of my requests last time it was, they said they'd just put on the next one, but I think the original purpose of that map and the way it was like 2 or 3 meetings ago when we passed that motion that said they'd include both the approved seller and then just the nominated list, that it would just have all of them. So I don't know if that's going to be added. If not, then I might just vote no on that, but it doesn't matter too much, I guess. We'll see it eventually, I guess.
I'm sure there will be another cycle this year, and I think I would fully expect that we'll see it at the time. Any other comments? Can I get a motion for adoption?
Move we approve the minutes as corrected.
Okay. Motion and second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign?
No.
We have a 1 nay vote. Thank you. Okay, old business.
Good morning, Tim Telfer, Land Acquisition Manager for Volusia County, Volusia Forever Program. The first item on old business here is a consideration of the Frank Ford Trust property. It's currently listed on the B list, and as the committee recalls, at our previous meeting, the Penland and Pomeranke property had moved from the B to the A list, and it moved from the B to the A list because staff was able to report back that we had structured a financial arrangement with some partnerships to help subsidize the cost of that acquisition. That acquisition is traversing right now. Our partners are reaching out to their governing bodies and requesting permission to proceed, and we'll give you an update at the next meeting as to the status of that project. Similarly, we had communication with a state agency over the past month who indicated that there was funding available through the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. This is federal money that moves through a state agency that's sometimes available for land acquisition. conversations were positive enough that we put this on the agenda for consideration to make sure we could make the timing of the grant deadlines. After the agenda was published, communication with that state agency indicated that they had selected their projects and this would not be one of them. So staff is no longer requesting that B to A move at this time.
Any questions for staff? Okay, thank you. Land leases?
Hello, Nick Dunham, Land Management Activity Manager. I'm here to answer the question that was asked last time. What is our official position on cattle leases? So cattle leases, and I'm speaking to this in the terms of a fee simple purchase on how we manage those. We have guidelines provided by the County Resolution 2003-80, which provides the goals and objectives on how we manage conservation lands. Within that resolution, cattle leases are an approved use of conservation lands. And our approach is that we are open-minded to exploring leases where feasible. Now, what that means is if a property comes with a lot of pasture or a current lease, those typically we evaluate for restoration or potential cattle lease in the future. We never take habitat out of habitat production and turn it back into a pasture for cattle lease purposes. So as long as the cattle lease is compatible with the purchase acquisition purpose of the property, the management plan, and the ecological integrity, we do allow cattle leases.
Okay, question. If the management plan anticipates moving the property away from pasture and back, restoring some areas or anything, is that also part of the lease arrangement? Is that there would be a change over time in terms of either the extent of the area involved or the term of the lease? Would that consider the management plan and any ultimate objectives?
Yes, so ultimately we try to have a long-term objective for that site, even if it's 10 or 15 years out and there's a restoration plan. That is addressed when we do the leases. The leases do have term limits, and that's set by staff internally as to our goals and objectives on the long-term management.
Okay, is it income producing to have the leases?
Yes, the leases we have do generate some revenue, and that helps offset the management costs. And the other benefits is they do provide some property security from the leasers that help us keep an eye on everything's out there. And the grazing activities do help reduce fuel loading for fires as well. So it does help habitat-wise having some grazing on some of the properties.
Okay. Any other questions? No, thank you. Okay, new business.
So in brief, as the committee is aware, we've met a number of times this year. And the purpose of our meetings each time has been one of two objectives. The committee is either asked to review the applications and body of information presented by staff and determine whether the property is eligible for the Volusia Forever. And then the second meeting, the subsequent meeting, is to sort those properties into an A list or a B list. The B list is for those projects which were determined to be eligible, but for whatever reason, it's not appropriate that they be pursued at this time. And the Penland Pomeranke project is a perfect example. It was on the B list until we had a good partnership arrangement, and we moved it to the A list, and now we're moving towards acquisition of that property. Today's meeting is the sorting meeting into the A and B list. So previously, you've found 6 of the applications that are eligible for the Volusia Forever program. And today, we're going to ask the committee to sort them either onto the A list or the B list. There's a brief summary up on the PowerPoint right now. If there's any further questions on your role today, we can pause, but if there are no questions, we'll proceed on to the first application.
Seeing no questions, please proceed.
Okay, first question, or first application. Jill, if you could advance us one more. First application for your consideration today is called Riverbend Ranch Reserve. This is a fee simple application. Property is approximately 1,276 acres in size. Its site ranking criteria, it scored 11 out of 19 possible points. It is within the Volusia Forever it is within the Volusia Conservation Corridor. This is a Florida Forever boundary area, which means it is potentially eligible for either acquisition or matching funds from Florida Department of Environmental Protection's Florida Forever program. It is also within the NRMA and eco overlay areas. It's within the Florida Wildlife Corridor, and it abuts Deering Preserve at Deep Creek. And so with that information, we'll stand by for any questions or committee actions.
Discussion?
I
Joe?
just have one comment. From what I've seen, this is probably one of the finest pieces of parcels that we could acquire in this current rendition of Volusia Forever, and I would move that we put this as on the A+ list.
Second.
Okay. Any other commentary? I have a motion for an A+. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, like sign. Thank you, sir. It is a beautiful property.
Just the open spaces, would those be, again, let open on this one? There's a couple non-forested areas. Those are going to be replanted anytime soon, or that's not the case? for those
I think there will be a management plan developed.
areas? Okay, well, we'll see how it goes.
Can I comment? I couldn't understand what you were saying, but you were talking about planting the open spaces back.
Well, I just want to know what kind of, remind people what the plan was. There's, as you can see from the aerial, there's like 2 open fields.
Open spaces are not necessarily bad. I mean, some people say, well, let's plant them all in trees, but quite often when you have open spaces and pasture with the cows or no cows, hopefully cows, because they help keep the grass down. But you also encourage quite a bit of biodiversity by having that also. So to have a plan in there to where everything we have, we're going to try to cover it up with pine trees is kind of single-minded. We need to be way more open on what we want to do. And when we do have these open spaces like that, if it's not a management issue, they're not a bad thing, in my opinion.
I wasn't, just to be clear, I wasn't commenting they're bad. I was just asking what was the plan with them.
Thank you. Okay, next item.
Next slide, Jill. All right, up next for consideration is the Evans property. It's a 123 acre piece outside of Lake Helen for a conservation easement. It scored 8 out of 12. And potential matching funds, it is the FDAC's Rural and Family Lands Protection Program. It is in the NRMA and eco overlays, the wildlife corridor, and it abuts Deep Creek Preserve.
Discussion.
If you're looking for direction, I'll make a move, put this on the A+ list too, because in my opinion, conservation easements are probably one of the best tools we could have in protecting land at a reduced cost without the management costs incurred to maintain it. And therefore, I would move that we put this on the A list also.
Second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Thank you.
I'm going to try to advance the slide here, but I'll point out one bit of information. The previous application, you consider the Evans property, and this property that I'm about to introduce, Walkup Timber, are both scored under our forest and farmland scoring criteria, which means it is a conservation easement, but essentially an agricultural easement. So we're going to work with the landowner to make sure that those agricultural pursuits stay intact as we preserve that property. Okay, so the next one for your consideration is the Walkup Timber application. As I just mentioned, it's a forest and farmlands application, roughly 100 acres in size. It scored 8 out of the 12 possible points on its application. It is also going to be eligible for funds when they are available from the FDAC's Rural and Family Lands Protection Program. It's within the Nerman Eco Overlays. It's also within the Wildlife Corridor area. And with that introduction, we'll stand by for any questions.
Any questions, commentary? Is there a motion?
Make a motion that we put
I'm
this on.
sorry, Wanda? No? Okay.
Let him go.
Make a motion that we put this on the A list.
I'll second.
Motion and second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign? Thank you.
All right, next up for consideration is the Old Empire Grove property. It is a fee simple application of 74 acres. Did receive a site ranking criteria of 8 of 19, also around the city of Lake Helen. Now, Lake Helen has, I won't say pledge, but they do have indicated to help with the acquisition purchase.
What was handed out to the committee was a resolution from the city of Lake Helen with their pledge, at pledging a match, I believe, 10% of acquisition costs.
They also stated they would manage the mainland, correct?
I have a question when it comes to the management side of it. You know, that's pasture. It's very minimally managed now with a lot of, I've seen soda apple out there. I've seen a lot of other, I won't say necessarily invasive weeds, but it's a mess. Does Lake Helen have a plan on what they want to see with that property, or has there been any discussions on where that might, because right now it's a big pasture out there that's been cut for sod and with a few cows run on it, but is there any vision for what we may see with that property?
Please.
Good morning. Lee Evett, City Administrator of Lake Helen. Last evening, the commission did approve a resolution, as Brad indicated, not only pledging a 10% acquisition assistance, but also indicating we would manage the property in perpetuity. So, and we realize the condition of the property now. It's not property you would want to have in your portfolio the way it is today. As a matter of fact, we're going to be pledging in our report, we have a plan that I presented to Brad this morning with costs associated with removing invasives, keeping invasives out, and how to manage the property going forward. So we understand the situation and we've accepted liability.
Okay.
Sorry. Let me
ahead.
ask, sir, what do you envision this to look like in 40 years? What will this parcel look like?
In 40 years?
40 years.
Well, I guarantee you I won't be here in 40 years. but-
Well, tell us what our children will see in 40 years.
Good point. I hope they see a very well-managed, open pasture land, as it has been for 100 and some years, owned by the same family. Now it's pasture land. It had been citrus before that. But it will be in 40 years, one of the very few open spaces in what otherwise would be a very urbanized area. And I think it will be a reminder of what this area used to look like many, many, many years ago. And so hence the need to really preserve it. It's a haven for wildlife right now. It's a haven for invasives, which we have to remove. It is pasture land. We have cattle on it. We don't, the owner does. So I think it'll be a good example of the way this particular county used to look probably 100 years ago. And I think that'll be an educational process as well as anything else.
You make it look like 100 years ago, like you're going to plant some citrus trees out there probably on it. So.
Yeah, I know. But it'll be, I think it'll be, how do you forecast what's going to be missing in 40 years? And I think what's going to be missing is a lot of stuff that is not on your agenda. We would look to you to save the things that should be saved. And this is one of them. I mean, once property gets into development, it's gone and it's gone forever. They're always going to have structures and multiple owners and everything else. So we would strongly advocate buying the property now with our assistance and keeping it the way it is today.
I was, I'll say, a hesitant supporter of this property. It, in its current condition, it's not a strong contender in my mind. And I approached it more on the basis of this program as it has been rebooted, opening up to some new arenas, one of which was just having some rural vistas. And I thought this might fall into that category. But I don't know that I see it being urgent in terms of, again, it's an environmental value. It's not a strong contender, and so I'm not sure I would give it the same immediacy. Certainly, when I look at it in comparison to the properties we just talked about, it is not in that category of value. I think it has a value, but I don't think, if I'm grading on a curve, it's not a strong environmental contender. And I wanted to put that on the record because it was a close vote last time, and I wanted to reflect my thought process.
Let me, if I
But
may.
it's a stretch.
If I may, Madam Chairman, one of the things I failed to mention a few minutes ago, this particular piece of property has uplands, it has wetlands, it has a lake. So it has the essential elements for many of the things wildlife will seek out, particularly in an urban area. We will be a haven for those type of creatures. We did bring our environmental engineer with us today if you have any particular technical questions, because trust me, you've just about exhausted my knowledge of the whole subject. But we feel very strongly that this is going to be, in 40 years, a piece of property people will want to come to, walk through, bike through, and be a critical part of not only our community, but the entire county.
Let me ask a question along those lines, because I think we've raised an important question here of what the vision is long term. And to me, it would be, it could be highly influential to have the city bring forward a vision and a plan to reach that vision. You've committed to a participation in this, and I guess I'm just going to pose the question. It's not a gotcha, but it would be important to me to see the city invest in a plan and a vision of what this would be going out in time, and perhaps bring that back to this group as part of advancing it in terms of priorities.
Just a master plan for the property,
I think
for the
so.
lack of a better term.
I think so. I think that that's an easy term to understand. It would speak to where you see it going, what the challenges are, and just what makes this worth the
Special.
investment. It's going, yes, because it's also, and I can't help but notice, and I know we're not talking about dollars, but this has development rights on it. And that means it's also going to reflect that in what somebody expects to get for it in terms of value. So it's a big investment that would be from the public. And I think we have to acknowledge that going in. And something has to speak to the balance of public investment.
I understand your point. Right now, the property appraiser values the property at 1.75 million. So it is a significant commitment on your part. It's certainly a significant commitment on our part. And I'm just a hired gun here. So if any of my friends in the audience, like the mayor, will want to help me, I'd certainly appreciate it. So.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. So,
I didn't come prepared to speak this morning, but I've never stopped a politician. You asked for a vision from the city of Lake Helen. I'm not officially representing a vision that we have put together officially, but I can tell you that there is a great deal of love for this property in the city. It's very much in the center of the city and is very close to the heart of many of Lake Heleners. We see it, it backs up right to our equestrian center, which is connected to our Blake Park. And we have trails going through those now. I envision trails going through this property. Very low impact, just a very much a nature trail. A trail right now runs up, an official trail runs up the side and goes towards Ohio Avenue, which we're hoping to get continued on out through a bunch of Boy Scout land and moving on towards the east side of the county, going all the way across the county through a very natural, beautiful Deep Creek area. It is a land, right, like I say, right near the center of the city, at that probably will be developed if it isn't protected. I believe the family is going to move one way or the other. So it's your urgency, your question about urgency, I think is a very real one. I think it is urgent. I do understand the financial side of things. It is quite an investment, but it's you mentioned rural vistas. I hadn't heard that phrase, but I think that's very appropriate to this as well. It defines Lake Helen in the eyes of many of our citizens. While it's private property now, people already have an ownership of it in their hearts and have all but begged and pleaded for us to preserve it if we can. And this is perhaps the only way that the city of Lake Helen can, with your overwhelming assistance, make that happen. And we will work very hard to improve it. We know it's weak right now, but we'll want to improve it and make it a showcase for not just Lake Helen, but for Florida in perpetuity.
okay, sir, if you would turn in a slip, I'd appreciate it. I have discussion.
I have some questions.
Sure.
This is to staff. Are there additional matching funds from somewhere? The 10% that they're put up, is there additional matching funds from somewhere else?
So we have not identified additional matching funds beyond the 10% for this application.
Okay, and then the other question was, did the committee all get this letter that was sent to us via email?
I'm not familiar with that.
We were sent a letter via email, right? Everyone? I'm asking staff
Can you clarify which letter? I got several.
Yes.
Yeah.
pertaining to this property.
It was a letter from the public. I did receive one.
Yes, it was a letter from the public. I'm just making sure that everyone received it.
I'm sorry, who is the public?
This letter was from Nancy Wary. I can't tell you the date it was sent because I only brought the letter, so I don't have the date that it was sent, but it was sent by staff.
I think it was shortly after our last meeting.
Right, I'm just checking because everyone kind of seems like they don't really know. So, yes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
We got the letter.
Okay, I was just checking.
Okay.
I mean, I asked. The other thing that I just wanted to say is that we established the criteria and staff actually went to see this property because I asked that in the last meeting. They determined that it met 8 out of 19. So the vote was against the criteria that we established. But this committee did not go see the property when voting against the criteria. And being that it was a 5-4 vote, the similar situation happened earlier this year, and I voted against criteria on a similar situation, and I went to see the property, and I have to say that it drastically changed my opinion when I went to see what I voted on. So if we establish criteria and we go against the criteria with a 5-4 vote, and no one goes to see the property, I would ask you to take that into consideration when ranking.
If I could.
Sure, one.
I've heard this before, that we went against the criteria. I think our position on this board is to look at the criteria and make our determination. That's what we vote on. And I have been to see this property. I agree it is in bad shape now, but I also am a strong supporter of rural vistas. And I feel that this is one that could potentially be made into a beautiful piece of property. So when I hear things about we're going against the criteria, I just want to emphasize we're going against the criteria from the opinion of staff. If that was the only thing that counted, we would not have a purpose here. It would be just, okay, staff says this one meets the criteria, it's on the list, and now we determine A or B. That's not the way this works. Each of us is asked to look at the criteria and make our own determination. And I think that's what happened. It was a close vote. There are people that had doubts, still have doubts, and I understand that. But each of us is voting the way that we feel on any given piece of property.
I understand, except for the fact that I just asked them if there was additional matching funds and they said no.
I'm sorry, and the significance of that is?
That's
One of the-
that's a
one-
pretty strong criteria.
It is, it is. Is that your
That's-
point?
Mhm.
Okay. It's simply that it doesn't meet that criteria for matching funds beyond what the city has
Correct.
offered.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, we have voted before based on matching funds or lack of matching funds.
Well, and it's worth at least a mention that the city's contribution is less than we have normally expected from other municipalities of greater size.
We had a major discussion in one of our meetings about cities not having matching funds, which I'm going to remind everyone when we were going through city by city. It was a pretty major discussion. And that I just asked, and if it was 10%, it speaks for itself.
In,
I simply asked if there were additional matching funds, and the answer was no.
are you talking about from an agency or from the city?
The question is to staff, are there additional matching funds at this time? I'm not trying to, it's a simple, straightforward question. And the answer from staff, Tim, was no. Is that correct? There are no additional matching funds beyond the 10%.
Staff has not identified any matching funds beyond the city's commitment.
Thank you.
Okay. Cookie, do you want to make a commentary, please?
Alan Cook, Lake Helen. Been a citizen for 33 years, been involved with the county for 20 some of them years and stuff. And when you talk about a vision, this is a vision to make Lake Helen what it has always been, and we hope it stays that way. I was involved with the whole thing with the arena, moving the arena over where I did the excavation for that and everything else. And believe it or not, I talked to Steve. I did his house for him and all, but still I talked to him probably 20 years ago on what visions that we should have for Lake Helen. And one of those visions was like farmettes, 2.5 acres and little barns. And we had the whole arena there for the horses and all. And I cannot say anything but that's what the vision is. And this could help or make Lake Helen a lot, not like we want to, let's put it that way. And I think that we could take this and put it into, I should say, Pat Northley sidewalk going through town. That's what I call it, Pat Northley sidewalk. But anyhow, I feel that that could be part of that. And we could do things with that and open that up with the arena and everything else. And I I was involved with LaFisa's deal when we first did that quite a few years ago. And that was really unbelievable what I put through with that and everything, how great it was and what it does and everything else. So I feel as a citizen of Lake Helen for 33 years and being involved with the county and everything else, I feel that we should definitely move forward on this one way or another. And that lake can become a beautiful lake. Dig it out, make it right, and a nice lake, build up that area. And yes, you're right about that gentleman over there, I think his name is Mr. Feeser. But anyhow, you're right. It was overgrown with the weeds and stuff. And Steve really never went forward to take care of that at the time. But the way I see it, it's the vision for the city of Lake Helen, and I'm 110% for it. And thank you for your time and consideration.
If you would turn in a slip, please, I'd appreciate it.
Yes.
Thank you.
I'd like to make one comment. I mean, I think this is a great piece of property for the city. But I'd like to hear like from Brad or the staff is, I mean, we're in the process of buying environmental land. And you could see this land going into the city and pressure on it in the next 20, 30, 40 years to put ballparks, put a lot of horse facilities, to do that kind of thing. And you can say, nod your head, no, but if you're going to run cattle in there, when people, there's going to be a time that there's going to be other people that move into that community that aren't in favor of that. And there's going to be, and so I would really like the city to understand what restrictions long-term there are if we use funds from this program to buy this property. What will they be restricted to being able to do out there? I mean, I thought one of the neat things about what DeBerry was doing is they were putting in a chunk on that, and they wanted to buy part of that property so they could do other types of development that weren't allowed on the county portion of it because of the funds we were using. So I would like somebody to kind of make sure that they're fully aware that they get into it, that some of the vision that their other citizens might have may not work with this property bought with these funds. Now, I think it's a great idea for the public to be involved. I'm not totally sold that this is good environmental land. I don't see actually much environmental land out there. And I'm kind of torn. I've driven by it many, many times. I think it's a fantastic piece of property. I'm just not sold that this is something that should be in this program. It should be in some other program, but I'd like to hear what staff has to say as far as that goes.
Well, pardon me, I'm going to jump in and start, and my colleagues can follow up my comments with anything they feel is fit to add. So staff is an advisor to the county council, and obviously the Volusia Forever Advisory Committee fills the same role. We both provide the county council with as much information as we can in making their determination on whether these properties should be acquired. They're the ultimate stewards of the Volusia Forever funds and ensuring that the voters, what they voted to approve is actually implemented. Where we have situations where we have an outside manager, by that I mean not Volusia County, we've contemplated a number of instruments there to make sure that when the county council goes to vote and potentially vote to acquire this property, that they have the assurance that it's going to continue to meet the tenets of that referendum in the future. And every piece is going to be a little bit different, but the basics that we've contemplated throughout is a management plan and potentially a conservation easement with some type of a deed reverter or some other enforcement mechanism in it to ensure that the standards from the Volusia Forever program are met. Now, what are those standards? The Volusia Forever program, the referendum that was approved by the public, was for environmentally sensitive conservation lands, as you described. We are comfortable on county land as well as on the outside parcels, writing in certain authorized passive recreation uses. But we will explicitly prohibit development of the property, for example, for ball fields or affordable housing or some other idea that is not compatible with the Volusia Forever referendum. We've had a number of conversations internally about how we're going to approach these various properties and try to get those assurances built in for the county council when they consider the acquisition. But yes, you are very much on point. We are going to look to ensure that in perpetuity, the purpose of those funds that were used to acquire the property is protected.
Thank you.
A follow-up question on that. I know you just talked about the other example where they dedicated their portion of funds to a certain amount. We're not at obviously the deal phase yet, but if their 10% wanted to go to 7 acres along the front of a road where they could have different recreation, would that be something that staff could look at?
This is getting a little bit complex for this forum now. But if there is a proposed split or some type of alternative uses, our obligation remains the same. The portion of funding that's going to receive Volusia Forever dollars has to meet Volusia Forever criteria. And so we take a close look at the proposal at that time.
And I just have one other comment in general, and you can take it either way in deciding the thought, because I share some concerns with the chair. I just want to point out the resolution only applies, the matching funds only apply if we purchase this in the 2022-2023 year. So after that, they are not available.
If I may, the reason we put that caveat onto that resolution is because we don't like to speak for following boards after us. And there was some pushback in the community. There's always a little bit of pushback. It was one way to ameliorate some of that. We do understand that there are limitations to this property, great limitations. We have no desire. We already have a ball field. We have a football field. We have a little league field. We have an equestrian center. We're not looking for land to develop those kinds of things on. We're looking for land to be exactly what this is, a beautiful, picturesque piece of our heart. And we want to make it nice and beautiful. The lake is a very shallow lake. It moves a lot as water comes up and down. It's not the kind of lake that you go out and go boating on. We're not looking for that type of development. We're looking for Florida type of preservation. We really are. And I can say that I know that we can, as a city, put together and codify those type of restrictions. I know the city is amenable to that. We're not looking to do anything but exactly what you were just talking about. So I appreciate that.
Madam Chair.
Sir.
Russ Brown, Senior Assistant County Attorney. I forget my title sometimes. Just to ask, or to answer Mr. Gamble and Ms. Gal's question, just if, any funds bought with Volusia Forever has to adhere to the requirements of Volusia Forever funding. That said, there is potential, and it's happened in the past, where property either has to be acquired through eminent domain and it pays back the funds, it goes straight back into the Volusia Forever funds. Or we have partnered with other entities to allow them to pay back the portion of those parcels that they want to use for additional development in the future. Thornby Park comes to mind. Actually, I think at the beginning of that acquisition, the city paid for the Uplands portion separate from the funds that paid for the preserved part of the park, if you will. So there is some precedence in the past for carve outs, if you will, to allow for what would be considered non-passive or development type construction to go on a property. So if that came up in the future there, I'm just saying there's a mechanism to take care of that. So you could move forward with the Volusia Forever purchase. The city at a later time could come back and say, hey, if it's an agricultural easement or whatever the case may be, if it's fee, we'd like to release this portion. We'll pay back based on an appraisal that's done per acre, per square foot, whatever it is, the money that Forever would have bought that parcel, that piece.
Russ, just for my clarity, management by a city can be simply management. It doesn't have to be a transfer of the property, correct? I mean, the property can stay in county ownership?
Sure, we could enter into any agreement that we agree to. Yeah, we can do that. I'm trying to think, Brad, if you want to help me. I know we've got some properties that we manage for the district that we're typically partners. I'll be quiet if you want to interject.
So, well, yes, so we can hold our joint ownership with them. Some people in the past, another mechanism that the Water Management District uses is granting a conservation easement. So they grant that conservation easement. The reason they like to do that is that there's an enforcement mechanism and an inspection mechanism each year. So they can claw back. So what they do is they give up their percent ownership for a conservation easement, which protects their investment. So there's many different ways that we can do it.
Thank you. I just wanted to be clear that it wasn't a purchase and a transfer, and then there was no mechanism to retain a position in terms of how it develops or could develop going forward. Steve?
I just want to kind of pull us back. We're going to decide A or B list today. Ms. Schreiber mentioned, it was a close vote last time. I went 2 weeks ago and looked at it. I voted no. It was not eligible. I went and looked at it again, the property, to see if I was wrong. I was not, in my opinion. It's not that impressive to me. I'm still not there. I just don't see it. I
just want
it's
to
a B
add,
property.
I appreciate anyone, Wanda, or anyone, Steve, who have actually gone to see the property or is aware of the property from previously. Because it takes effort to do that, or maybe you just know. So I always appreciate when people see a property, especially how they vote, to go out of our guidelines that we established. I appreciate that. I just want to make that clear.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have some comments and questions, if you don't mind. I apologize. There's just a couple. So my first, I think the gentleman here had mentioned the cost at somewhere like 1.7 million. I know that's not our job to just look at that, but in our staff notes, it said like 1.3 million. When was the 1.3 million quote taken? I guess it's a question for staff, or is the 1.7 maybe, was that a misspeak?
Well, I can't compare the two values. The 1.3, if that's what we had in the report, is really just a summation of the property appraiser's assessed value. Now I got to point out, pardon me, let me improve that language a little bit. I'd like to point out to the committee that there's been a little discussion of value of property here. The property appraiser's value is not a reflection of market value. We would go out and perform an appraisal of any property that's going to be acquired, and that would be the basis of any negotiations.
Very good. Thank you. But I guess one of the other contingencies that we're looking at here is the matching funds. And I know that it's been talked about 10% is the current offer, and no other offers, as was mentioned. So I guess at the moment, I'm just going to clarify my thinking is that with 0% matching funds, it like didn't get on any list. With 10%, I feel it got onto B list. Maybe with a bit more matching funds, it could like get up to A list. That's kind of my thinking right now. I'm at least, comfortable with it, obviously on B. And to quote the letter that I think Ms. Schreiber was saying, the person who wrote it said, with that said, after giving all their comments, and this is for everyone's benefit who maybe isn't on the our board, said, I do support the acquisition of this property for conservation. However, the conditions of price and maintenance as being negotiated are simply not in honest nor accountable. Maybe that sentence was a little weird, but that's the quote that I pulled from it. So people want it, but there's questions. So again, my question, or I would be happy for it to go on A if the match was higher. So I guess that's a question.
I'll put in 10,000 of my own.
Okay, well, I appreciate that.
And I'm not being completely facetious. I believe we could raise a little bit of money. I honestly will do that on my own. But it's not the type of match you're actually asking about. I understand, but had to throw it in.
I need to clarify, we're not negotiating on the floor. It's not the role of the committee. So we need to see if we're going to put it on A or B, please.
I would like to add another thing. Is talked about this could reflect the historical nature of this. Would Lake Helen consider some kind of educational signs or booths or something set up to inform the people who walk it as a park to like what is this history? What that to give it added value in that sense? Was that the intention?
First of all, let me mention, I thought we had the correct number from the property appraiser at 1.75, but we're more than happy to take 1.3 the staff has. And you have to also realize we're not giving you a dollar commitment, we're giving you a percentage commitment. Whatever that percentage is, the city has agreed to match 10% of the negotiated price. Also, I will tell you, the discussions that I've had internally with the commission have basically said this property be purchased by the county and all uses are regulated by the county. And it is in perpetuity. It is not ever going to be the ability of the city to put baseball fields or anything else out there. So they know this is a very restrictive situation. And I think it goes to the sincerity of the city to preserve the property. One of the reasons that they want to purchase it is you don't know what future demands are going to be on that property, what future development demands will be, what people can talk people into in the future. And I know the commission feels strongly that they would like to have the support of the county being the owner and the regulator of uses so they can honestly say, that's not ours. It's in perpetuity in conservatorship. But I'm sorry, now I forgot your question.
Well, I got more, or actually, I'm not sure.
It was just
I
about
think
an
you answered.
educational component.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, then, and to go to that, whoa, thank you. We are looking for you to agree in the management agreement what we can and cannot do. We would love to have educational signage out there. Anything that would support the purpose of the acquisition would be ours to do. And just for one tidbit on the management agreement, we've already forecast $50,000 to remove invasives initially. And we estimate 5,000 per year thereafter to keep it invasive free. So that's also part of our commitment.
Thank you.
I guess the last thing is, again, the only thing we're looking at now is fee simple acquisition. Is that correct? Just confirming.
That's what it's here for.
Okay, that's
Okay.
all. Thank you.
Steve?
So I think because there's so much discussion here, we're trying to get there. I don't think that we have gotten there as of yet. I know that we're going to use the guidelines in which we have to make the determination, as well as there probably will be some personal input that we have. One of the questions that I have, I would go to the environmental aspect and how are the invasives going to be removed? What is the process going to be? And I think that will help some of our determination. It's not going to change the site ranking criteria, obviously, but I think it may be helpful to, for a personal decision, to understand how we're going to clean up the property. If we could have the environmental, I think there's someone that they presented as an environmental person, and
Yes.
if we could listen to them, that'd be great.
Good morning. I'm not sure if we're completely far along enough to answer that question.
I'm sorry, sir. Could I ask you to introduce
I'm
yourself?
sorry, Chris Fagers from With Pond and Company. We work as the city engineer for the city of Lake Helen. But there's going to have to be some studies to assessments to figure out the coverage of invasive and exotic species out there, or plant coverage. But it would be some sort of obviously spraying and potentially physical removal of that material to accomplish the invasive removal.
Okay. And if you would turn in a slip, please, I appreciate it. Any other commentary? Questions? Joe?
Yeah, I too have had some back and forth on this property because it is a beautiful piece of property. When you look at the map, you see that I call it the Lake Helen chain of lakes, kind of comes right up through it there. And anybody that's followed Lake Helen over the last several years know the problems that they've had with the lake, where it almost went dry. And I guess it's coming back. It's looking much better now. And a lot of that was done, to close in a canal or stopping the flow going out. And so I see all these kind of interconnected. And so from an environmental standpoint, it checks those boxes because it is a very apple park. Now, a few minutes ago, I made a case on keeping cattle on a property. I don't know that I could do that for this property. You know, one, it's not the best farmland that there are cattle ground. It's great citrus ground, but not all farmland is equal. This is on a sand ridge. It's good recharge. It's good with those ponds going down. There's a lot of, I won't say elevation change, but it is a big hole going down through that. I assume there's probably the drainage from Lake Helen proper that goes into these sand ponds. I would envision, and you know, we all have our ideas when we look at it. I ride a bike past that usually once a week. You know, I would like to see more wooded areas, and that's my own personal area around the pond that would create more wildlife habitat in addition to open space too. But I think this is something that, as far as this, our purpose today is to, you know, make an A or B and send it to the council. This is a property that could set some trends for where we go in the future with Volusia Forever, because it's not like that one I just said is an A+ property out there in the middle. It's got all the stuff we want from an environmental deal. This is something that we need to create going forward when it is covered up with houses all around us, that will create that new environmental piece. Now, the one thing I had heartburn is, I understand this piece was, up until a few years ago, was zoned agriculture. Is that correct? And then the city zoned it to more residential, so they created through their process for the density. Is that true or not true?
It's been zoned residential since 2018, and I can't give you the history.
So recently, well, 28, yeah, but okay, so some point, and that's where I have a little heartburn in the process going forward. Properties that were agriculture, that somebody went in and did an upzoning on it, and now they want to sell it for a bigger inflated price. And that's where I have some heartburn with this. If this was pure agricultural lands that was still being assessed as agricultural lands, to me, it'd be a slam dunk, and I would fight tooth and nail to try to get it added on here, because it's already been zoned. The city of Lake Helen zoned it for residential. Yeah, that's the other side of the story. Why, if it was that important, why was it rezoned? And so I don't know. That's where I'm at on it. But I would vote for yes today. If I still think it's something that this is something that the council should decide on. There probably needs to be some discussion on beyond our level of on beyond our pay grade here. So with that, I would make a motion that we do move it to the A list.
Okay. Is there a second?
I will second. Can I perhaps add a caveat that, like, for this particular movement, that that the council looks carefully at it as opposed to maybe some of our other A1s? I guess, I don't know if we can add that into the motion to just say, please note, I don't know if that makes sense, an asterisk or something.
Okay.
Is that-
It'll be in the
Okay,
minutes.
yeah,
That's
just,
good point.
that's all. Okay, just I'll second as is then.
Okay, any further discussion? With that, there's a motion to move it to the A list. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, like sign?
Aye.
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 We need a roll call.
Marianne Connor,
Nay?
Wanda Van Dam,
Yes.
Steve Crump,
No.
Gerald Feaser,
Yes.
John Gamble,
No.
Jessica Gao,
Yes.
Derek LaMontagne,
Yes.
Derek Orberg,
No.
Suzanne Schreiber.
No.
Motion fails.
Is there do we need a motion to put it on the B list? Yes.
I'll make a motion to place this property onto the B list.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Roll call vote.
Question.
Oops.
So a no, if you don't put it on any list, does that mean it's gone then? I'm just curious. A point
Good
of order.
question. Does it, yeah, can it automatically go to B list or is it just limbo?
I'm not aware it automatically goes to the B list. So for confirmation from the committee, I think a motion is always best. You know, I guess there could be some discussion that if it doesn't make the B list, then it falls off of being recommended, even though that's the prior action that was taken by the board. But I'm not certain that's the way we want to go. I just think for confirmation, it needs to be, there needs to be a motion passed that it's on the B list. I'm not aware the rules automatically place it on the B list unless I'm wrong, Brad. Am I wrong?
Okay.
Am I wrong, Brad? Does the rules say?
You don't vote to put it on the, where does it go? All right.
I want to make sure I'm not incorrect. I'm not
I
aware.
think,
Oh, sorry.
I think there needs to be committee action because it is eligible,
Right.
but the committee needs to, in the form of a motion, make a statement as to their recommendation to
So it's an
council.
affirmative statement of,
Now, you bring up a good point. We may in the future want to talk about if it does get recommended and then there's a motion for the A list and that fails, and then it automatically becomes the B list, that we would amend the committee's resolution that authorized and the criteria, the categories, if you will. Maybe that's something we need to change in the future because it is a good point.
okay.
Well, so I'm sorry, but I'm a little confused here. We're voting on whether it's on the B list. So a no vote is just that it's not on the B list because some people wanted it on the A list. If they don't vote at all, Russ, or they vote no, let me just say that if they vote no, that it's not on the B list. What does that represent? That it's just not on the B list, but yet they voted.
At this point, it would represent it's kind of in limbo, if you will, in my opinion, because it's been recommended for either the A or B list. Our rules don't definitively state that if it fails to make the A list, it automatically goes on the B list. I can understand that seems like a common sense requirement if it fails from the A list, but we don't specifically state that. So if it fails with this motion, I think then the committee needs to take up how they want to proceed with the parcel at that point.
Can I ask for what we did previously relating to items that went directly to the B list?
My recollection is we voted them directly on the B list. I'm not aware that we've had a similar situation yet.
That is correct. So the committee always made a recommendation as to A or B. There was never an instance where there was a no vote. It's either on A or B. You've already deemed it eligible. The role here is to sort and make a recommendation to council.
If my recollection is correct as well, I think we had a couple of these situations where it didn't make the A and then there was a subsequent motion right away for the B and it passed. I don't think we've had this come up.
Okay.
That's the best I can do at this
I
point. But it's
understand. I was just trying to clarify
Yes,
because
ma'am.
it kind of went all over there.
And it's a great point raised by Mr. Feaser that I think we need to look at. Maybe we just default that once it's recommended, the motion is, should it be on the A? And if that fails, then it's automatically to the B. But at this point, we don't have those rules in place, that rule in place.
Well, there's a motion and a second.
Yes, ma'am.
So do we need let's do a roll call vote just for clarity.
Mary Ann Connor,
Yes.
Wanda Van Dam,
Yes.
Steve Crump,
Yes.
Gerald Feaser,
No.
John Gamble,
Yes.
Jessica Gao,
Yes.
Derek LaMontagne,
Yes.
Derek Orberg,
Yes.
Suzanne Schreiber.
No.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Now, I'm sorry, but I'm trying to still figure out if we just voted no, but the property has already been determined, I still don't clearly understand why we had to have a vote for B list because we've already determined that it qualified. So it had to be on A or B.
No, ma'am. Actually, so, and I understand where you're coming from, but right now we don't have a rule that automatically says it goes on B if it fails A. We can look at the policy and make that change. At this point, had the motion failed to put it on B, then my recommendation and advice to the committee is to whether somebody who was on the winning side of approving it as eligible at last meeting wanted to make a motion for reconsideration as to whether it's eligible. So that would open it back up again as to whether it would be eligible.
Well, this kind of came up with another property previously in my mind. And it was said that we had to wait a certain amount of time to determine a property ineligible. That was my understanding on another property. And I don't believe that my impression from previously was that we wouldn't be able to determine that today.
I'm not familiar with the previous parcel, Ms. Schreiber, that you're talking about. I'm sorry. But at any point with the rules, if a winning party decides that they want to change their vote at a later meeting, they can move for reconsideration as long as they were on the winning side of the initial motion approval.
Okay. I would just like to point out that there is another option. It's not just straight A or B. I mean, I believe we could have added like an A with caveats, or we could have added, I mean, that's how I interpreted. We can make a
I
different
think today is
recommendation.
A and B.
Yes, but what I'm saying is maybe the motion was worded in a way that like we could have done it separately. So that's why I'm kind of against an automatic, if it's voted off. If we don't vote for something, then that means we did something else, because that's not what it would mean to me, as I would like to say yes to whatever happens, not just have it be assumed or something. Just throwing that out there.
Yes, sir, Mr. LaMontagne. My advice to the committee would be that at this point, just like it doesn't have an automatic deferral to B, that would not be, because it's not in your committee resolution appointing you and the criteria, that would not be a proper condition to apply to whether it's A or B.
Madam Chair, we've already voted. Let's move on to item 5.
Sure.
Can I ask when we're going to discuss? Can I ask at what point we're going to discuss, Russ, the ruling like you just brought up? The policy?
In terms of changing the policy?
Yes.
Let me jump
Yes,
in on
ma'am.
that, Russ, because I think, as we've discussed revisiting some criteria later in the year, I would think that would be an appropriate time to perhaps discuss any other notions we have about process and flow. That's how I would see it. We're going to have a further discussion later this year. So I don't know if that's helpful, but it seems to be an opening to have those discussions. Okay.
Well, before you move into having those discussions, now, as I understand it, our terms, a lot of us, our terms will be up soon, right? We've been at 2 years now, or so. Is that time?
March.
Having fun, but
March.
in March. And so there'll be a new board.
Correct.
Sitting up here. Is that something that we should, since our experience is something that we should address prior to us going, or is it something that the new board, without the experience, let them learn through our?
And this is just, my thought was that if we take the advantage of our experience in these cycles and have a discussion about some of the criteria, which is what my focus was, how are the criteria working? And are they doing what we had hoped they would do? I think that opens a door to at least have some discussions and perhaps make some recommendations for someone else, not necessarily for us.
And I agree with that. I think we should give it what we've learned and what our experiences were, so that the next ones can hit the ground running.
That's how I would say.
Thank you.
We'll add it to the agenda for our December 7th meeting. That will work.
Thank you, Brad. Okay, next item.
Okay, the next item for your consideration is titled Pickett and Cooper. This is a pretty simple application, approximately 40 acres in size. It scored 11 out of 19 possible points. It is within the Florida Forever Volusia Conservation Corridor area, so there are potential matching funds available. It has the NERMA and Eco overlay. It's within the wildlife corridor area, and it also abuts Wiregrass Prairie Preserve. Stand by for any questions.
I move that we place this on the A list.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Thank you. And last item, Atlantic Center for the Arts.
Atlantic Center for the Arts property, 30 acres. I received a score of 10 of 19. Potential matching funds. It is in the Florida Forever Spruce Creek project boundary, and it is directly adjacent to the Door Sleeper Spruce Creek Preserve.
I'll make a motion to put it on the A list.
Motion, second.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion?
Yes. What is the current zoning on this property? They have a value of what, $100,000 an acre?
I think there's a PUD on it, as I recall.
It's a custom zoning, yeah.
Yeah, it has room for development. I mean, I think that's what the PUD made provision for, so I think some residential units to be on this property. And even though there are limitations, I guess, in terms of the PUD, you know, PUDs are reopened every day. They just are. It's the nature of development. And so,
Well, and again, this gets to a problem and it's not for discussion right now, but as long as we have these insane land development regulations where we go out and we give entitlements to properties that aren't even close to being developed, that they come back, 20 years from now and say, oh, I can put, 200 homes to the acre on here. I want a lot of money for it. And it's like, well, you may not be able to develop it, but they've already given the powers that be, the municipal or county powers that be, gave these these entitlements that now they asked that we have to go pay what was given. And I just have an issue with that. That's personal. I know I would not hold up in a court of law, but that's just my 2 cents.
no, I get your issue. Absolutely.
And I don't want to see us get into a trend down the road where someone says, I got this piece of property out here, and it's not going to be really easy to develop. But if I can go in and get it bumped up in density, and even if I can get it sold to whoever, conservation or wherever, I'm going to make a whole lot more money off of it.
Mm-hmm.
And since we give away all this stuff free in this county, and we've had a lot of smart growth, I've sat on many of those in the past, and we always looked at transfer development rights. We come up with all kinds of tools in the toolbox that we could prevent this stuff. But when you have, 16 municipalities in a county that everybody competes to see who they can give away the most, it's hard to do that. And so when we end up a situation like this, where you're going to go pay $100,000 for an acre for a property that may or may not be developable or may not be environmentally sensitive, I just got a little bit of issue with that. So,
Wanda?
Was this property one of the priority parcels for the Doris Sleeper Creek Preserve management plan? Did they not, in their management plan, point to this parcel as being one of the target parcels for them wanting to expand the preserve?
Yes, this parcel is in the optimal boundary for the
Optimal boundary for
Doris
the creek.
Sleeper
Okay.
Creek Preserve.
Discussion? Questions?
But quick question, was there any other funding partners on this?
We will approach the Florida Department of Environmental Protection as a potential partner as it's within a Florida Forever project area.
Tim, just to clarify, this is in the wildlife corridor?
No, I believe this is outside the
Outside of
wildlife
it?
corridor.
Yes.
Does anybody have the map handy?
Way outside.
It's outside.
You see what they pay in taxes?
yeah.
Any further questions, discussion? Is there a motion?
I think we have a motion and a second.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Motion and a second. Can we get a roll call, please?
Okay, this is to put it onto the A list.
A list? Mhm.
Mary Ann Connors,
Yes.
Wanda Van Dam,
Yes.
Steve Crump,
No.
Gerald Feaser,
No.
John Gamble,
Yes.
Jessica Gao,
Yes.
Derek LaMontagne,
Yes.
Derek Orberg,
Yes.
Suzanne Schreiber.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Okay, that takes us to the end of new business. Are there any advisory committee comments today? And, go ahead, Derek.
I wanted to thank staff for their hard work and especially for Russ. He got me some answers after the last meeting I'd asked about, so appreciate that. I do hope at our future meeting in December, when we talk about rules and so forth, that we can discuss all those criteria, maybe adding some. I don't feel it's not in our purview to, at least, I mean, we are looking at the monetary side of things, and I believe that's, we're not negotiating, obviously, but I'm glad that that's in here, and a per acre value is an important number to consider, and I do hope we can, especially since the way I interpreted the referendum for Volusia Forever is that it's like we will tax ourselves for money, so it's very monetary related. I don't know if it's been mentioned yet, but I guess just confirming that that meeting that was scheduled for next Saturday is postponed. That I think we were asked to go to maybe attend. It's, what's it called, the corridor meeting?
Wildlife corridor.
Yeah. Is there a date rescheduled for that, as far as you know, as of this today?
No rescheduled date, but you are correct. It's been postponed to outside of the election period. We'll return to the committee when a date's been selected.
Thank you. Just want to make sure the public knows about that in case all they get their news from is our committee meetings, which I highly doubt that. I do, well, we got other letters I'm not going to talk about since they weren't on our thing. I personally want to thank Jeff Brower for trying to protect our environment, especially he brought up a letter about an area that's sensitive to the environment recently, and I encourage you all to check that out. It's to help stop the Pioneer interchange, because in my opinion as well, I do think it's going to cause a lot of damage and definitely raise prices for any attempts to save areas around Spruce Creek. As you just saw, that was a very expensive property. So I do appreciate Mr. Brower's support of that. And on that last map that was shown, this proposed interchange is on one of those other optimal boundary parcels, which doesn't make sense for me why the state would try to do that.
And
so,
that would
yeah.
be outside, that's outside the business of our group today.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
I just want to add, I find it odd that we would discuss policy and criteria towards the end of our appointments when we're making decisions now. We still have months left. I don't know what we're going to be making decisions on between now and December, unless staff tells me that there are no more meetings until December. I just find it odd that we would wait all the way in towards the end of our appointments to discuss policy and criteria.
So the next meeting when you'll gather up is going to be December 7th, as you'll see on the screen. We have a cycle that opens from October to mid-November, and you'll start your eligibility review on the 7th, as well as we'll get into the mechanics of the program.
Can I clarify? And at that point, we'll at least have staff recommendations again. So we'll have the benefit of, I think, 3 cycles. And I think it would be valuable to the discussion to be able to really look at a body of scoring as we go into it. So I think the timing is okay. I think it'll take advantage of our experience. Okay. If no further discussion, we are adjourned. Thank you.